Biava again. And let's see here. It's about not quite 0500 Central Daylight Time, which means it's about 1000 Universal Time Coordinated. We're going to spend some time this morning talking about humility and gratitude and how it's reflected in the boots I wear. Well, let me go ahead and start at the beginning. I can remember the first pair of shoes that my father bought for me when I was maybe 4.5 years old to wear to church. My father was amongst other things, he was working for Aerojet in Azusa, California. We lived in Claremont, and we attended church each Sunday. My younger sister hadn't been born yet, but my older sister and I, and of course Mom and Dad, would go to church. And I remember my dad had a part-time job. He sold shoes by mail order. But he had been taught how important good shoes and footwear are to the overall health of everyone. And I'll never forget my father trying as hard as he could to make the shoes fit correctly. The shoes were a little bit oversized. Remember, I was just 4.5 years old. I was growing. And he was trying to accommodate for that growth that was to come. And I remember his voice and his hands trembling as he tried to explain to me that he was doing the best he could to make sure that I had good shoes and that I had to learn how to take care of them. Well, that was 59 years ago. In addition to that, my mother had worked for the International Shoe Company. And she only lasted just a few days. Mother was working on a machine, or was being trained to work on a machine to sew. Excuse me. To sew shoes. And she'd had an accident where she accidentally got her thumb caught in the sewing machine and ran the stitching up her thumb into her wrist. Mom said she fainted, but when she came to, that her co-workers had, while she was unconscious, extracted her hand from the machine and removed the needle and the thread from her hand. So at a very young age, I began to have an appreciation for the importance of footwear and the sacrifice of the people who build footwear. About 3 years ago, I was having trouble with the footwear that I was wearing and had worn for nearly 20 years. I had gone to the same store and bought the same brand of shoes in the same size. And they weren't top quality shoes, or boots, I should say, but they were serviceable. They were carried by Farm and Fleet. They were relatively inexpensive. You could buy them typically in the 1980s for around $75. And if you could get them resold, and they were resolable, they could last about 3 years because of the nature of the leather involved. These shoes were actually made in China that I was referring to, that were sold by Farm and Fleet. And I had worn them for years. They were a consumable, but they kept my feet protected and dry, and I wore them year-round. I did not invest in getting them resold because, simply put, the leather wasn't a high enough quality as to withstand the demands of service that I placed upon them. Salt would cause them to deteriorate, and of course, eventually the leather would split because it wasn't properly tanned and treated. Well, eventually Farm and Fleet discontinued that shoe or boot, and I was forced to look elsewhere. And God put me here in Olney, Illinois. And ever since I was a child, or a younger man, I should say, over in Clay County, I was aware of Grundman shoes in Vincennes. But I had never been to Grundman's. Everybody would talk about how expensive the Grundman shoes were. Well, there was a reason why they were expensive. And over the years, since those days, that my mother and my father both taught me their lessons and their experiences in dealing with shoes and boots and footwear. I felt it was finally time. I had saved my money, and I went over to see what they had available. I had actually called to make an appointment, and they asked me to just simply come over and come in. In the days that I grew up in, and my mother and father grew up in, the first thing you looked at that an individual was wearing was their footwear. Their choice in footwear and the presentation in their footwear can tell you so much about the individual and the affairs, the state of affairs, and the state of the world that they are living in. They can tell you a lot about an individual's character. And here I was, walking into the store at Grundman's, aware of this, and not aware of how I was being observed not only for the footwear that I was wearing in, but also in my gait, in my walk. They could sense that there was something wrong. And we sat down and we discussed why I was there and the cost to replace the boots that I had, and then the cost to have boots actually manufactured by hand in their factory to specifications that might help me. I have a couple of comments here. I'll digress for just a moment. If you listen, you'll find out. Thank you for joining me, though. I wear those shoes with everything, and those shoes belong to me. I have stewardship of them. But like I said, I was being consulted, and this was 3 years ago, as to being fitted with corrective shoes or boots. So I knew that I was going to be spending some serious money on new shoes. I knew I needed to. Good footwear is not cheap to begin with, and handmade footwear, handcrafted footwear, is exceptionally expensive because it is not made on an assembly line per se. It is literally made by it's made with the assistance of machine by people who are entirely focused on not the machine working properly so much, or how can I put it? They're focused on the customer. They're focused on you, and they're focused on me. It took about a month for the first pair to be made, and that pair was made to make sure that they had taken and made their measurements correctly. And I was to wear those boots for about a month in order to make sure that my foot and those boots were properly matched. And they were. And then I took the boots back to be checked and examined, and they could look at my feet and make sure that everything was as good as it could possibly be. And then I had the second pair of boots made. Now, that pair of boots are these, and they're now 3 years old. The first pair of boots aren't here with us right now. They're actually back at Grundman Shoes in Vincennes, Indiana, where they were made. And the reason they're back there, and they look on the outside just the same as these, no different. But the reason they had to go back to be serviced is because if you look here towards the toe, I'm having a hard time focusing, but if you look here towards the toe, you can see how the soles have worn up and are just beginning to touch the foundation of the shoe itself. Once this wear gets up into the foundation, the shoe is damaged and it becomes more expensive to service and repair. In addition, if you look at the heels, and these are a good quality heel. This is a Vibram sole. But if you look at the heels, you can see how they've worn like this. This is no fault of the sole or the manufacturer of the shoe. This is just normal wear, but it's something that needs to be taken care of. And the Vibram sole is a one-piece sole, which is exceptional and provides a good, safe, and long-lasting sole to walk upon. And it looks like there's a lot of wear left, but it's, like I said, up here where my shoes wear the quickest, and this is where it would wear through and deteriorate and cause the foundation to be damaged and to possibly bring the shoe to the point where it could no longer be serviceable. So, any rate, those first pair are now back over in Vincennes at the same facility, Grundman Shoes, where they were initially built. This pair here was the second pair that was made 3 years ago. And you can see the patina on them. All right. You can see how the folds, how the bending of the toe has made these creases. All right. And of course, you can see the polish that I put on it and the gloss. All these things help preserve the leather, which itself is a high quality leather, much higher than the leather in the boots that I had worn before. Now, I knew, and I still know, that ideally you should have 3 pairs of high quality shoes in order to protect your feet and to get the most service out of your footwear. If you start at age, 18 and invest in good, high quality shoes that are carefully made for your feet, and if you spend a modest amount of time with those shoes, with the correct products to service them, those 3 pairs of shoes, which may end up costing you in $2,025 close to $1,200, will last 75 years. This is no shit, Sherlock. They can last 75 years. But you have to be mindful of so many things. Now, let's look at the new pair. This was the pair that I picked up just yesterday. They are actually identical to the shoes behind them. They just happen to be brand new. And if you look, of course, you can see, it's pretty much the same shoe, except for they don't have the gloss and the patina. Patina is not something that you can put on at the factory. Patina is something that the owner of the shoe, once it leaves the factory, helps the shoe to acquire. Patina is caused by your little trips and stumbles and the occasional scraping of a shoe. And as you can see, these boots are absolutely pristine. The leather is dyed, they've been sewed, but they have not yet been sealed. All right? These shoes are as innocent and as fragile as a baby. Oh yeah, you could go ahead and put these shoes into service right away. But you're doing a disservice and a disrespect not only to the people, the men and women, who measured your feet and went down on their knees before you to do so, and then went back into the workshop. The same people, when you're at Grundman's, they go back into the workshop and then start to build the boot. You're also disrespecting the animal that died so that you may have this boot. A lot of people don't think about that. You know, these are made of leather, all right? In this case, I believe it's cowhide. This leather in these boots is exceptionally clean, all right? There's no scarring on it. That means that the animal was well cared for by its caretaker during its life. It means the animal was not abused or beaten. The animal was placed by God to serve us. But we must be mindful of the animal itself. Because if we aren't, well, we cut short the life that goes beyond the actual mortal existence, if you want to call it that, of the animal, but also the life that the animal gives even after it dies, as we wear our footwear. Now, like I said, if you start in your 20s with a good pair of fitted shoes, what's called bespoke, you can make 3 pairs last 75 years. That's, maybe enough leather that came off of the hindquarters of perhaps one, maybe 1 and a fraction head of cattle. That's it. And then you get 75 years worth of wear out of that. What it prevents from happening is the waste that comes from choosing and not taking care of your boots, or the waste that occurs when you choose boots that are lower quality. You may pay money, pay less money up front, but in the long run, we all pay for that. Because once those boots or shoes wear out, they have to be disposed of. That becomes environmental pollution. And our landfills are full of cheap shoes. It makes me sick. It's our choice. All right. I have a sister who is an animal rights activist. All right. I'm sure she has her opinions about me wearing leather boots and, of course, consuming things like beef, chicken, pork, fish. I mean, I love animals. I really do. Right? I mean, I've had animals for pets, and I've worked around animals. not very long. I don't work around them like a cattleman or a farmer that raises, stock for consumption, but I've had experience, and I'm mindful of animals. And that mindfulness also extends to my footwear. And, a person who takes care of their boots and spends a little time with their boots, every day or a few times a week, and that patina begins to develop, all right, they're giving homage to that animal. And they're also giving homage towards the people who care about all of us so much as to engage in the trade and service of being shoe and boot builders. It's a very, very challenging thing for people to engage in that work. A lot of people don't respect their work anymore. But it's the shoe and boot builders of America that have really made America possible. And they're getting to be about as common as dinosaurs. And we can't clone them. These are people who go into this life and they serve us without complaint. They are grateful for us when we walk through the door. They try to educate us if we only take a moment or two to listen. And they, we owe them so very much. I mean, I can remember my mom's stories and my dad's stories. And I can remember reading books on, what it means to be a gentleman and how to take care of your shoes and the importance of shoes and footwear. So, it's a very, very humbling thing. Now, there's one more thing I need to touch on here. And you're going to have to excuse me a minute. Because I get choked up. And that's the color that I choose. This color is a reddish color. You can see it kind of clearly in the new boots. It's not a tan. It's a red. And when you buy boots or shoes in this color, the miracle of it is that that color goes with almost anything. I can wear those boots with my cami trousers. I can wear those boots with blue jeans. About the only thing I really can't wear those boots with is a tuxedo, but how often do I ever wear a tuxedo? I think I've only worn one once, and I rented it for a wedding. And yes, I have one pair of shoes that are dedicated to that occasion, although it'll never happen again. But for my everyday and the occasions where I'm called to wear a jacket and tie, these are my footwear. And they are red. If you look at the dye and wax, and I'm sorry I didn't bring it out this morning, but if you look at the dye and wax in the jar, that I use to help maintain the boot. I'm going to show you like one little place here where I stumbled the other day, and you can see a little, if I can get it where the reflection doesn't overcome it. Let me see if I can balance it here on my knee. But it's right here. You can see that little place there. You can see how that's lighter than the rest of the boot. And I'm sorry I can't focus very well, but it's right at the tip of my finger, right here. See that? Well, I need to apply a little bit of dye wax to that. All right. And to do that, I'll have to actually scuff the boot with my finger and wear through the polish wax that's on top, and then apply this dye wax so that it can be absorbed back into the leather. All right. Now, fortunately, that was just a little stumble, and it didn't scar the boot so much. Just kind of roughened it up, and it went through the polish and the wax that is on top. All right. In another place, you can see where it needs it, although you can't really see it clearly, is in this area here and here. All right. It needs that because these areas here are stress points. Okay, and just like you need to massage your hands, and you know how good that feels when you receive a massage, you also need to massage your footwear, because this is the skin of an animal. All right, and it wears, and it's stressed, and it needs relief. So in these areas where things get light, you go back and you apply a polished wax, and you help to nourish the footwear. But back to the color. It is blood red in the jar. Literally blood red. It looks like blood. It looks like, how can I put it, congealed or gelatinous blood. The reason I chose that color is to remind me that, first of all, if it wasn't for Christ's sacrifice, his blood, I wouldn't have anything. And if it weren't for the inspiration of God and the willingness of others to sacrifice their blood for the cause of our nation and our people, well, I wouldn't have much of a life myself. This is something that's not unique to America. People die every day for causes. They shed blood so that others may know freedom. America doesn't have a hammerlock on this. But we have to be mindful of these people. Even my mother, she shed blood, literally, so someone else could have shoes. You need not be a soldier or a warrior. I'm sure that you know in your own life where you may have shed a little blood for somebody else. But it's not so much what we're owed for the blood we shed. It's the blood that everybody else sheds, so that each one of us can have a blessing. And in my case, the thing I am most blessed by are these shoes that enable me to walk. And I am much humbled by that. And so thankful to all the animals and all the people and our God that's made this possible. And I'm overwhelmed by it. So, there you have it. Think about it. When you put on your shoes, no matter what color they be, or where they were made, think about it. When you see someone who may not have shoes to protect their feet, think about it. When you think that you don't have enough, but you have shoes. Because I remember how my mother would admonish me when I would complain. And she would say, I once complained because I had no shoes until I saw someone who had no feet. I have feet. I have shoes. I have the finest boots that anyone could ever ask for. And I'd have none of it if it weren't for the blessings that God has arranged, and I don't deserve it. can do is say thank you. But it's not enough. And I pray that each of you who watched this may have a higher understanding of the importance of humility and gratitude and service. Well, I guess that's it for this morning. I better wrap things up because those new boots, it's my responsibility now, and I've got to get them treated so that they're going to outlast me. They might be able, and I'm sure they'll be able to be worn by somebody else after I'm gone, should God will it. But in the meantime, they need to be taken care of. And I need to practice good stewardship of the blessing that I've received in these. And I pray that you're blessed as well today. So, to all of you who've joined me in this moment, please stay safe, be kind, good luck and Godspeed, and we'll see you around town.